Hello, I'm Butch Curry from Zombie Nirvana Games. Welcome to the 7th installment of Fantasy Cartography with Adobe Photoshop, the podcast where I share my favorite tips, tricks, and techniques to help you make cool maps for your role-playing games. I'd like to start off this week by giving a special thanks to the folks who've subscribed to the show via iTunes. I'm overwhelmed by the response I've gotten there, but I would like to ask you one small favor. Please just take a minute and leave a review, whether you love the show as is, or if you think there's something I could do differently to make it better. As much as I try to promote the show, it's really you guys, the fans, that drive it and make it successful. And the more successful it is, the more of them I'll do. Now that I've got my weekly shilling out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, we've come a long way in the last 6 weeks, and now we're coming into the home stretch. We've added our natural elements by placing a forest and a lake. A lot of times when I'm drawing a map like this one, I'm just sort of making up the layout as I go along, which is one of the reasons I use techniques that are as flexible as possible. When I'm putting a map together on the fly like this, I usually start with the natural elements and then build the man-made elements up around them like we're doing here. But if you've got a real specific layout for your town in mind, there's no reason you couldn't reverse that process. Now, to get started on the roads, I'm going to first make a new layer to put the roads on. From here, I could just grab a brush and start drawing the roads in, but I like to use one of the pen tools to sort of sketch everything in first. And as you'll see in a minute, that lets me move things around and get them exactly where I want to before I commit to one of the brushes. I'm going to use the freeform pen tool. It's very easy to use if you haven't used one of the pens, because you just sort of grab it and draw with it. So just very quickly, I'm going to draw in a few roads. Just like so. Maybe one across here, maybe something in here, down here, and over here, just like that. Now the next step would be to brush these roads in. I'm going to select the brush, bring up the brush menu. Now the brush that I like to use for this is in the dry media brushes, so I'm going to click on the brush flyout menu, come down to dry media, click on append just to add those brushes onto the end, and then scroll all the way down to the bottom to the one that I want, which is this one right here, the pastel medium tip. So I'm going to click on that to select it. I can see right away that that is going to be way too big. So I'm going to shrink it down. Let's see how it looks at about 10 pixels. That looks pretty good. Just undo that. Now I'm going to come over here to the Paths menu. And on these icons down on the bottom, I'm going to come to the circle, the hollow circle. That is Stroke Path with Brush. That will put this brush stroke over all these paths with one click, just like that. Now I can just sort of click away from the work path. And kind of take a look at it and see if there's anything I want to do. So I'm going to just undo the stroke, re-click on the work path, and I'm going to use the selection tool right here. Let me zoom in just a bit. Selection tool, I'm just going to kind of highlight a piece of the road and grab the points in it and move them around just to maybe straighten this out a little bit. Maybe straighten this out a little bit and bring this line down. You can see it's just a matter of highlighting different points on the path and moving them around to get them exactly where you want to. Just like that. Zoom back out and stroke it again. Make sure I got the brush selected first. There we go. Stroke it again. Click away from the path. And that looks pretty good. Now the road is looking a little dark and intense for me, so I'm just going to come back over here to the layers palette and bring the opacity of this layer down just a bit, maybe around 75. That looks pretty good. Now I've intentionally put the road in a little close to this lake on purpose so I can show you just kind of a neat little trick. I want to put a little more space in there. But I don't really have a lot of room to move this road around. So I'm just going to come over here to the lake layer, and I'm going to click on this chain link between the layer thumbnail and the layer mask. That is going to unlink them so that now I can move one or the other without moving them both. I'm going to use the move tool here and just move the lake down a little bit. And as you can see down at the bottom here and on the side, the mask is still the same, so I can move this wherever I wanted to, and the mask is going to stay right there. I don't have to remask the lake at all. Just like that, just to put a little more room in there. And then once I'm done, I'll just come back over here and relink them. And now that we've got the roads added in, we can just add our mask by coming down here to our paper layer once again, control clicking on it, coming up to our road layer, and then just clicking on add layer mask. And just as we've done before, that automatically masks out these sections off of the paper. Now, I'd also wanted to talk about adding our buildings in this week, but I can see that I'm beginning to run out of time, and it's a really interesting technique that I want to make sure I have plenty of time to explain. So I'm going to put it off, and we'll talk about that next week instead. So that means that it's going to do it for this week. Don't forget to head over to zombienirvana.com for this week's show notes, my weekly Photoshop tip, or if you have any questions, comments, or requests for future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and happy mapping!
Will ye go, lassie, will you go?